Whatever you want to do is all right with me. 'Cause you make me feel so brand new.
Good morning. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice. This is your host, Amelia Duran. And this is a spontaneous show. I've been thinking about I was simultaneously reporting the other day on the Texas shooting. And at the same time, I was also reporting on the largest child porn bust ever in Allen, Texas. 78 terabytes of child pornography. And there's something really interesting about this case that I noticed, and I posted a link from dallasnews.com regarding this child porn bust. There's something unique that they pointed out in this article, which was the Secret Service actually made the bust and the arrest, and I found that to be interesting. So I had to call Miss Lotus Justice, you know it. and so we're going to talk about this. So I'm calling her right now.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the Porthole to Justice, Miss Lotus Justice.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Oh, well, same stuff every day. In fact, it's the same. I still live in the under Roman occupation, and this is the way I see it. It's different chariots, even, But that's me.
I had to have my morning coffee, and go over, the different topics that I find on the internet for Social Media News Network and the Porthole to Justice. And I found myself the other day, I was posting at the same time about the largest child porn bust in the nation, 78 terabytes in Allen, Texas. Simultaneously, I'm reporting on the school shooting in Texas. And then, I noticed something really interesting about this child porn bust. In the DallasNews.com, they note that the shooter, or that this bust, the arrest actually was made by the Secret Service. So I found that to be very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, why would the Secret Service, which is a special delegation of the POTUS, think of that, the special grant, engaged in arresting people in a pedophile ring in Texas? Because what that would tell you is that probably the FBI is involved, that Department of Justice individuals are involved, either somehow conspiracy to cover this up. What people don't understand is that your president that you have now, Donald Trump, is actually there using the power of the POTUS in his executive capacity to be in charge of all branches of government, now in de facto, and vacant since the Civil War. They've never been reestablished, folks. It's one big corporation. It's a corporation in all respects, bound by our federal Constitution, which is a banking charter for the landed estates of America United. He's the CEO of the largest corporation that's allowed to have an army. People understand that there are certain corporations that are allowed to have armies, okay? Men with guns. In fact, you're allowed to have a private. There are certain instruments even in the 501c3s. Okay, even the 501c3s that are allowed to have their own law enforcement arm. Okay, And that's what's happened. You have a corporation with a law enforcement arm under the grants of law.
So
And
wait a second. Wait a
he's
second.
coming back, and he's having to exercise his police powers as a POTUS to arrest agents that have affected the largest human. Was it pornography or is it? I guarantee you, there's trafficking involved.
It was a website that was ran. Okay, here's the thing. It was a website that was ran to catch child predators, but they're now accused. They're now accused of crying foul. You know, it's a setup. Everything that we're seeing in these non-for-profit busts, the Children's Foundation out of the UN, that representative was arrested for
and he's under his executive order.
I mean, what we're seeing literally is it's the flip side of the mirror.
There's a young woman, and she's
concept.
Yeah, there's a young woman I met during Occupy. Her name was Michelle Mathis. She was a young black woman. I don't know if I've ever spoken about her before. I think I've spoken about her maybe in some of my videos or other things. But her name is Michelle Mathis. She's an Ohio native, Ohio native. And I met her in Occupy, and she was rambling about these crazy things about how the FBI had commoditized her sister's children, had taken video. She could prove that her children that videos of her nieces and nephews in playful activity within their house were being sold by the FBI in porn sites. Okay, at the time, you have to remember, this is back in 2009, 2010. I'm hearing this stuff, right? This crazy stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? I actually have a video somewhere where I sat her down and said, what is it you're saying? Because I was like, this woman is intelligent. She's a very intelligent woman, but the things coming out of her mouth sounded insane. But yet I knew her to be highly intellectual woman, very sound, and she would present it as factual evidence. And she even brought a case here in Ohio, and they dismissed it in the Fed, saying that they had commoditized her. That's actually case law in Ohio, Michelle Mathis versus, I think, the state of Ohio. But this is a woman in 2009 was saying that the FBI, now the FBI will tell you, well, we run those sites to try to trap predators. When the fact of the matter is they're not trapping predators, they're getting customers, folks. They're getting customers for their racketeering. In the state of Ohio, it is well established that 20, 30 years ago that we have firsthand eyewitness testimony and evidence that the FBI was materially complicit, meaning they physically were aiding in material assets of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the Northern Territories of Ohio to traffic children across the border. To traffic. These people have had their lives attempted and have been continually targeted since then. These are whistleblowers that used to work for the FBI undercover under the mafia, trying to get the mafia out. I guess they thought because they worked for the mafia that they were reprobates and would tolerate watching the FBI traffic children across the Canadian border. What you have here, folks, in Texas, which you're not quite understanding yet, is that 2 days before this, quote, mass shooting, which I assure you was a triggered event, triggered by deep state operatives. I'm not saying they didn't kill kids. They don't care. They kill people all the time. They killed thousands of people during 9/11. But that was a false flag event to cover up the fact that the Treasury was missing $15 trillion. Oh, wait, it was the $15 trillion that may have been over in the Bank of Ireland that our current Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury at the time had tried to unlawfully was laundered through the Bank of Ireland. See, people don't quite understand that if there's a mass casualty event in this country, they're covering up something that was brought forth and disclosed as a crime of the state with implications of deep state collusions and corruptions and racketeering and RICO and violations and treason and sedition. If the Secret Service sees a website, that means it was probably seized under the authority of the direct office of the POTUS under an executive order. The executive order where it says he would seize things pertaining to child trafficking. Okay? That website probably is a domino. It's a domino right now because it's imagery. But every one of those images have a timestamp and a date stamp. Everywhere that image has gone can be tracked on the internet. Everybody who's looked at those images, everybody who's purchased those images, everywhere those images have been since their creation and inception can be tracked. bet you it runs to some very important people as agents of state and or through agencies of state. Because what Michelle Mathis was basically exposing way back when, and again, I don't even know if this young woman exists. I haven't talked to her since Occupy. I have not talked to her family. I don't know if she's alive. Well, I don't know. But she exposed to me personally and could prove in a lawsuit, she made these averments in a lawsuit, that the FBI was actually stealing imagery from her sister through her sister's computer and stuff, and had commoditized her sister's children. The FBI, people, the FBI created the pornography. The FBI created the pornography, just like the FBI is creating these mental nutcases that are shooting up kids, like they did in Florida. If you notice, every time there's a mass shooting, if you look into the facts of the matter, the FBI has had their hand in it. Just like, oh wait, the two guys that ran the plane somewhere, well, weren't they under the direction of the FBI? Absolutely. These were people that were under the supervision of the FBI. You have the FBI, because this is really the center of all things at this point in time. And you're going to find it's the FBI and the DOJ, Department of Justice. Because as Judge Jeanine just noted, I think on her opening remarks on May 20th, the fact that you have an attorney general that is allowing treason to fly in this country, where you have a previous administration who actively participated in infiltrating and creating false data and information and dossiers on a person running for president. This is the stuff you in third world countries. It's called a coup, folks. In third world countries, when this happens, we call it an attempted coup. You have a DOJ head in Sessions that's refusing to indict and prosecute clear agents of state who, within their state capacity, attempted to coup the POTUS, a coup office of the president. Whenever you put
Congress, we have a Congress that won't do its job.
Sessions in not doing his job, he's actually affecting treason and sedition. And he has a fiduciary duty. See, that's what, and this is where all these attorneys, this is where the attorneys are highly in error and mistaken. They've been wrapping that we're immune from what we do wrong. No, you're not. I've had an attorney say this to me. I was like, no, you're not. You're a fiduciary agent. By law, they are a fiduciary agent who has a fiduciary duty to protect our interests in our estates from false claims against statutes and the high law that gives those statutes through our full faith the credit. So our faith gives statutes credit.
So what do you predict? Okay. What do you predict is going to happen? I mean, what is your outcome in
Federal Reserve Act's going to
in law?
In law, the law will run regardless of what people's machinations of insanity out here in this ridiculous place called the public domain with all this false press. As I've said, the press is only protected. The press's job is to investigate for us things which the state itself is not investigating, a lot of times because it doesn't have time. And so the press is kind of an arm of the people, an investigative arm of the people. If the press is turning around, wrapping themselves in that investigative arm, producing propaganda, they're not the press anymore, and they're a criminal enterprise. See, that's the way the law works. You only have the protections of the office and the grants of law when actually you're operating within those ins legis instruments. Ins legis means your creation of statute or creation of law. The concept free press is a creation of our Constitution and our law, and you are bound by said law. If the people wrapping themselves in the free press are actually working against those laws that gave them that grant, they are not the free press anymore. They are deemed criminal enterprises. And they're all in corporate charters now. They've all agreed to operate in commerce. So no state, no court, the Supreme Court of Ohio has a DUNS number. It is a state franchise of a public nature. It is an instrument, ins legis. It has waived its foreign state immunity as a foreign state instrument, even if it is owned by Zimbabwe. At corporate charter, the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio is a corporation who is subject to the laws of the United States because it affects commerce. within the territories of the United States, okay, it's not immune from being changed from a de jure or even de facto corporate franchise to an illegitimate criminal syndicate and enterprise when it fails willfully and wantonly in its ends legis mandates. And as such, when it affects bonds, that's bond fraud. The bar union and the titles and nobility infiltrates of the deep state have been defrauding our treasury since 1809, since the Treaty of 1812. The first bankruptcy of the United States, effected in 1841, resulted from fraud by trustees in the private treasury and the private bank of the United States. They were private instruments that we paid people. We allowed them to call themselves the Treasury of the United States, but it was a private held and operated business and instrument. Okay? It defrauded the American people and stole over $20 million from the general coffers of the of the estates of the territory. So it stole the estate of the Ohio Territory, meaning the wealth that was put into a bank account in the federal instrument in the private treasury. It stole the money. The attorneys have been defrauding our treasuries and the instruments of trust that we have paid others to manage since before, forever. That's what their job is. That's what the TONA was for. The TONA knew that these people were prone to criminality and operating for people other than who hired them to operate for them. Just like when you hire an attorney. You could pay an attorney $20,000, folks, as a private contract. Guess what? He has a contract that supersedes yours with his corporate state bar union to screw you and to mess with your case and to lay your case fallow and to conspire against your rights for the purposes of undermining a valid claim against the state, even though you've paid him to do the opposite. He has a superior obligation. So he's a double agent interpleader. So really what an attorney is, being that they always protect the interest of their corrupt bar union's corporate state, the state of, and prevent claims from ever reaching full maturity. See, attorneys basically abrogate against the crimes of state. That's basically what they're doing in every case they do, because every time they steal a baby, that's crime. Every time they steal a person that has no victim in their crime, that's a crime. So the states are abrogating for their own crimes. They're keeping claim their own.
So let's touch just really briefly on the issue of fraud on the court. Now, when I look at cases, okay, what I look for is inserted case numbers that belong to other cases in order to substantiate a case that may not qualify to be substantiated. The withholding of evidence, and then when people appeal on these grounds, what they're finding is their names are being altered into all capital letters or initials to create several different trusts,
corporate fictions, instruments of and each one of those names creates a securitized that is then handed to the Treasury in fraud. So you understand, this is fraud upon our Treasury, folks. What I'm making sure happen is that these criminals, this is what the TONA gives us that they've hidden. They are trustees. Every bond that has ever been issued on our full faith and credit, regardless of whether it was the de facto United States Treasury or the Treasury or the de jure Treasury of the United States, and then there's a private treasury too that we paid for that was never audited before the first bankruptcy was effected in 1841. Okay, so every bankruptcy we've ever been made to pay for has been based on fraud affected upon us and our estates of America by foreign title of nobility esquires who have surreptitiously been operating in treaty with foreign powers to steal from us.
Yep. And they are systematically contriving poverty to make a class of individuals more vulnerable to the human trafficking.
Right, because did is they had to bankrupt us. We're a very wealthy country. We are so wealthy, we have no concept of how much wealth we have. In truth, the American people, just in their incorporeal hereditaments and the patents they have seized from the American people unlawfully, that they run around using, like the military. The military is unlawfully using patents of the American people. They've never paid for them as a private instrument because the military is a corporation, whether people want to know it or not. The agency, the military, are corporate charters. Okay? And they are using patents that have been seized from people unlawfully and illegally. A lot of times through an assassination, I might add. Okay, we have a cold fusion machine that was brought to us 15 years ago, and they murdered the manufacturer of that, according to his best friends. And the day that he was found dead, suddenly how the FBI seized everything in his lab. The FBI folks. So you have key agencies here, the FBI being one of them, who have agents within them. And I'm not saying every FBI agent is criminal or is complicit in this criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States and the United States of American people and our treasuries and to baby traffic and to create bond fraud and to steal patents, either use patents, land patents, whatever. They steal patents and sell them and allow other people to lease and use them. That's a crime. They're not yours to do that with. So you have people who are operating by law and treaty as fiduciary dutied trustees, not your government, with protections, trustees in a commercial capacity under the UCC and the laws of the United States who are affecting bond fraud, racketeering, criminal syndicate, predicated acts of RICO, human trafficking, estate theft, barratry, treason, sedition, kidnapping, a treasury crime. See, people don't understand all of these cases, all of these acts, when they steal children outside of statutes and affect a conveyance of a, quote, property of the United States. Your child is a property of the United States governed by treaties, folks. International treaties govern the fact that in banking, your child is the property of the United States.
And
you have foreign...
I have a question. I have a question. When you get married to a man, do you become property?
In most states, probably, if you look at it, you still, yes. In some states, if I understand, as far as last time I was involved in the feminist movements, the real one, a lot of women could still be raped by their husbands legally. So marriage is a form of slavery for a woman. In a legal sense, but in a commercial sense, it's creating a corporation, a marriage. It's like, you imagine the man as being Time Warner and the woman being AT&T. It's a merger of your assets. Okay, that's really what you're doing. A marriage license is a contractual agreement in commerce between a flesh and blood man and or woman and a flesh and blood man or a woman, because it really, in law, marriage has no purpose. It doesn't matter. There's no gender to a marriage.
Yeah, I think I want to avoid. I think I want to avoid that merger.
Right. That's why the concept of legal, of them not allowing gay people to marry, it's actually a bar to commerce. It's a criminal act as a bar to commerce because it is a commercial compact where you join your individual estates, okay, your corporeal and incorporeal hereditaments into a financially binding instrument called a marriage.
I have yet to feel. I've yet to. I've never felt the urge to give a man that much power over me.
Well, if I were going to do it, I would suggest that you do it before the eyes of Goddess, who sees all equity in all things, because you don't need the state to be married. Okay, in the Bible it says, by witness of God, anybody who gives witness each other before witness of created covenant. And so I tell people, your first trust, okay, there's layers of trust, and this is in law and in philosophy. Law is philosophy, folks. The philosophy of what men do to make their lives better for all. That's what law is. That's what the philosophy of law, the purpose is. So you have your first trust is with your Creator in your God. Is God or goddess, whichever, But your first trust is with the being, the entity, the divinity that gave you existence. That is your first trust. That's the only one I ever care about. That's what the only one Christians ever care about. Orthodox Christians, that's the only thing they consider as a defining factor. Because you can do whatever you want in the other trust. Now, your second trust is with, as far as contractually, is with someone you choose to have a covenant with, your wife, your husband. Then you create assets of that covenant that in and of themselves, through inherent sovereignty, blood lineal consanguinity, your children, you create another trust. Then that family, this is Aristotle. Aristotle speaks of these things as far as how law is affirmed, how the state is created. From the man, the state of man, then the estate of man, and the things he holds, then his family. Then his family has a trust with their community. Then the community together and create a trust called states. Then the states get together and create nations. See, there's layers of trust. In the foundations of our law, we say that the first trust of all is with our Creator, to do right, to live peaceably. See, that's where our law comes from. The people run your government in this theocracy, this international cult theocracy, believe that your first trust should be with a man you've never met called the Vicar of Christ, who gets to define what rights you have and where you can bank and whether or not you are a vassal, a slave, a commodity, or free. See, that's the clearest way I can put the distinction between where the law of commerce lies, because here's the point. The whole totality of the world international banking structure is based with our full faith and credit backing all of the Federal Reserve notes that are used in international commerce to buy certain commodities. So we govern what that instrument will suretize in law. So if we, like for example, Sweden just made it so that they can marry babies. Guess what? We could say we suspend Sweden's banking through the United States Treasury because we do not put back anybody who allows children to be contracted with against their will. Because see, pursuant to the law of equity, children can't be engaged in the commercial compact of marriage until a certain age. That's a well-established fact from way back, folks, way back. In fact, adults and instruments of trust who contract with children when they know they're a child, such as what the bar union did when they made your child's birth certificate, that is because by law, you are not supposed to try to engage a child in contract. It is not considered a willful, consenting act upon the child from the child. It's considered an abuse of power. We could say we're not going to allow Sweden to have access to our treasury. Guess what? Sweden wouldn't be buying no oil now, would it? It could get it from somebody else. But we could also say, and if you do business with Sweden, since they are allowing criminal activity within their borders by allowing adults to engage in marriage contracts with children, which is against our faith, which we commoditize and insure with the Fed note, which will buy such oil, you're gonna be real cold next year, buddy, because it gives you oil. We're going to shut their access to our treasury off as well. This stuff is real simple, and it's divine in its nature. And they don't even understand that we set a really big trap for them, and they walked right in. They walked right into it. We pulled what most people don't know is, Napoleon invaded Russia. Okay. He lost. And this is what brought down Napoleon. You know why? Because the Russian people would do something called, they have this is what they've always done. Prussia is a grand, huge continent. It's very deep. It's large. People have no concept of how large it is. It's about twice the size of the United States, I think. Now imagine Napoleon comes in to where all of the commerce is, the ports of, and the Russian people, you know what they do? They do something called, they burn it and they go back. They just march back. They run away.
I know we talked about this one other time before, but I think it was quite some time ago. We talked about the Parents and Patriae Act.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're presuming that the Pope is the supreme father of all, as the vicar of everyone on this planet. These are salvo banks. Okay, every court in the United States is a salvo bankruptcy bank where they are salvaging vessels for the Pope in the Pope's name, okay, on the Pope and the elite monarch's behalfs. And they've been doing it since forever. That's what they do. This is the banks we use, folks. So these are salvo banks going out there affecting auxiliary maritime liens in suits of admiralty. They basically, imagine this, they're taking the dinghy off of a big flagship when they just pirated the flagship. In Clay's case, there was a dinghy attached to the big ship, the pirated mother's maker. They cut the dinghy. They cut it as it was tied to the mother, let it lay into the ocean afloat, and said, "Oh, we're going to seize an abandoned dinghy." That's literally within the allegory of admiralty law what they have done with Clay, and it's what they do with these mothers. They are seizing the dinghies and or the contents of the boats, the babies made from within, the keel, what's in the vessel, the pith of the vessel. They are seizing it, saying it's a bankrupted and abandoned instrument. The vessel is void of spirit. You literally are deemed void of spirit vessels floating about in this ethereal realm. It doesn't even matter whether it's round or flat. They are saying that you in your flesh are void of spirit, and you have abandoned their law where there is some man you never met who likes to allow pedophiles to run around in his corporate banks, mind you, in the cult of Rome, to define whether or not you have a right to use this realm, to use it, to exist free. That's what they are trying to tell you. From our construct, we all are born fee simple, immune from debt to new. That is the lawful declaration. We have inherent sovereignty when we are incarnated in this realm to be fee simple, free, even protected from detenue. Detenue means legal claims against your property. When Clay or any child from anywhere in this realm is born in this realm, why does some state or nation feel that it has the right to oppress its debts long-standing that the child never had any say in, didn't agree to, and doesn't know anything about constructs, origins, or history? And then when he does find out what the history is, it's going to be him by this construct. Why do these constructs that we like to call nations and governments feel that they have the right to oppress that child into the debts of their paradigm? They don't. By law. They don't. By law. By our law, they don't. Mm-hmm. We're the first law that says that. Our law says that. Our law said that when we said it in 1776 and applied for our banking charter, which now is the founding document of everything under the Federal Reserve note that runs the UCC. You understand? These are our instruments based on our faith that says, by law, when you are incarnated in this realm,
we in other words, we the people are the largest branch of government.
We are the government. But that's flipping the bar from feudalism and vassaldom to a true republic. Even the Roman Empire became a vassaldom, even though it was rooted in, it's literally, the origin of the Roman Republic were truly a republic creation, and it became a vassaldom and feudalism, military auspices of the Roman Empire, and corruption. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's why in Rome II, the founding fathers gave the people the 24 faces.
Is that basically what Caligula is based on? Is that what absolute power corrupts?
Yes, but what corrupted Rome was the instrument of the emperor. The emperor was the corrupted instrument. The people were not corrupted. The instrument, it's the man within the instrument. So what they did is, okay, well, we made the mistake of thinking, because in Republic, you could become emperor by a variety of ways. The Senate could vote for you, but you could also, the military could vote for you, because the military had their own vote, you know. They kind of listened to them because they were the people that were doing all the running around killing for them, right? But the military became kind of its own republic in the fact that you could join. What the Roman military was made up of all the conquered people. When the Rome went into a region, they conquered you, you could earn your sovereignty, basically, or at least a place in the republic, by joining the military ranks. See, there was a variety of ways to ascend into civilian citizenship in the Roman Republic. They had classes of citizenship, though, too. They had certain classes of citizens versus others. So,
except now except nowadays they're contriving poverty and even trying to eliminate the middle class.
That's because the instruments of Rome corrupted by the malfeasance of the men who took the offices. Within the men, the offices were not the corruption, the men in them. So what we did when we founded our republic was to make those offices be a little different. We took the emperor's position and gave the 24 seats, the fasces of honor, to the grand jury. We took the corruptions of the emperor out of one man's hands and put it into 24, who could only be called for certain things on occasion. That grand jury, that's your Supreme Court. That's actually defined in the Constitution. Because what construct, okay, if you follow the common law under its de jure constructs, and you bring forth a grand jury by lawful election of learned in the law, you have an election to see who becomes a grand juror. They're not appointed by the local magistrate. They are elected. There's 3 ways to bring forth the common law grand jury, but we'll talk about that later. If you bring forth a grand jury and they bring forth criminal or indictments to a petite jury of 12, who then find which you pick. So the grand jury sends down an indictment. You get to pick the 12. You get to take an indictment from 24 and bring 24 people you think would agree with you, of your peers, that what you did was lawful. Okay, we're not talking about statutorily. We're talking lawful in the high law, that what you did was right by the law. So 24 of your people think you committed a crime. You bring forth 12 with you who are going to judge you against what those 24 say. When that petite jury hands down a decision, it doesn't even have to be 12. In some cases, it was only 8. There's famous cases. You don't have to have 12 if you don't have enough people to make 12. You don't have to have 24 if you don't have enough people to make 24. That's true, too. But the fact is, that jury that you brought forth of your peers, if they agree with that grand jury, nobody, no court, no one can change that ruling. That stands as law. That is chancery. Back in the olden days, they could have done similar same thing, and you could go to the king, and king could go, oh, hooey on the people, I absolve you. A president, I promise you, a president, a POTUS, with his power to vacate stuff, I bet you by law, I could argue that the POTUS can't even give immunity to a ruling from that form of construct. That's why they don't like it. That's why they called it limited and strict. Yeah, because the law is the law. They wanted the ability to operate in statute and twist and the law and argue particularities that needed to be argued. I'm fine with that. You want to argue a particularity that babies can be a commodity of men to be trafficked? Yeah, that's not an argument we're going to have. Mm-hmm. That's a no. That's a no. And they found, and the reason why they had to argue that and are arguing that and have argued that and have put things within the statutes that allow them to do such repugnant things.
Like Vreeken versus Hardwick, the right to lie case.
Is because that's what their whole banking structure is founded on. And they know that if they can't cure that argument, if that argument is brought to be non-suit, then guess what? They get to pay. They get to pay the American people for every crime, every tort, every abuse, every criminal fraud brought forth, every criminal act of the Treasury. The ruling elite of the world oligarchs, and the Roman Empire Pope and the Queen and every monarchical of the echelon get to pay every man, woman, and child in this world for their crimes. Every man, woman, and child in this world
and
is no longer
we can prove the targeting via the Facebook leaks. I've had Katrina Hagen on the show. Maybe I'll have her on again, and so she can talk about.
This is for the whole shebang, folks.
Yeah, maybe.
This is for the whole shebang. The reason why you're going to see all this stuff about pedophilia is that's just a side vice. These people do other things with children. Pedophilia is the least of them. Okay? Trafficking them is the first, and they traffic them for a variety of things. They are promoting pedophilia because they see your child as a commodity that's their right to use from the moment they try to step foot in it. So they are eating children they are literally eating children as things to be used. Because if you think about it, again, law is philosophy.
Well, I had George Webb on the show. I had him on the show as a guest, and he went into detail about, how they view men as, they can be liquidated, right, for their assets, and women and children are targeted for trafficking.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, the facts are there. I'm trying to explain to people the higher construct here of the philosophy of law. Law is rooted in philosophy, in philosophical maxims and axioms. That's how you know when they're not in law, when they're not even anywhere close to law. Even at law has rules. That's what the word ens legis means. The word ens legis, E-N-S space L-E-G-I-S, it means one created by statute, one rule by what created them. Like, if you are a magistrate judge and you were created by a statute, that means that you have to follow the statutes and the instruments of the bodies of government that created the statute that created you. So if the legislature created your instrument, a magisterial, judge, and then they create statutes, you as a magisterial judge must follow the mandates within those statutes. And if that statute says you shall, it means you as a judge must make all those before you shall do it. It's not an option. Okay, these are administrative judges that are supposed to be following mandated forms and rules or procedures. They're supposed to be perfecting our ability to bring claims against our jubilee and to do commerce on either side, from either side of the bar, as a debtor or a creditor. What they're doing is they've got some third-party succubus over here that's eating off the ledger silently. We didn't even know they were there, and they're the ones who are paying these people to fleece us. They are being paid in lucre to eat the substance of the people. I think I've heard that before. I think I have heard, and the king does send foreign agents hither to rout out the substance of the people. The word substance is a very important word in philosophy. They're not just eating our wealth, they were eating our children. The people who maintain and profess slavery are the coup, folks. I can show you in law, in acts of Congress, where there is a contrived act called the Second 13th Amendment, which no one knows about, that established an implied trust that states that the federal Congress, the federal instrument, shall make no laws interfering with listen to the same words in Rucker-Feldman, the domestic institutions of state, thus to define slavery and peonage. Okay, so if 20 days before the Civil War, which was supposed to be about half of the country believing that slavery was okay and half of the country believing it was abhorrent. So there was a war about that central construct. That's what we've been told to believe. But 20 days before it was officially declared a war by the Rebellion Act by Lincoln, or even, I actually think the South declared a war on the North in that respect after they got shot at.
I think we need to do a whole series on the...
Oh my gosh, but 20 days before this, in the federal Congress, all the states that were voting states, voted unanimously to the Second 13th Amendment that said the federal instrument cannot make laws interfering with the domestic institutions of states to define slavery and peonage. So they voted that the federal government has no right to tell the states what to do and can't make laws governing or limiting the state's ability to define slavery and peonage. And 20 days later, suddenly half of us are in agreement and half of us aren't as a people. But the federal Congress verified that was a right. So these are, and I'm not saying that it does show a coup. It shows a conspiracy, but the conspiracy in and of itself were necessary steps to advance the rights of the individual man, woman, and child to hold and maintain under the law and commerce in both our real person and our corporate banking fictions to control who we are, who we give our allegiance to, who we serve. Because nations are political affiliations. The right to bank should not be controlled by men who want to war. To control the banks. See,
and I love how there's this whole campaign against me to discredit me and make me. I mean, it's
assume that
they target. Yeah, I mean, it's just, and they always have the same tactics over and over again.
Right.
And so it's on every level. It's all around us. It's our culture. It's systemic.
Well, that's because it's for the whole shebang. This is for it. When this is cured. When the implied trust of the states is cured proper in the law, the way the pillars are meant to meet, Ouroboros perfected, the right pillar, we have two pillars of law. When the first pillar and the second pillar start to eat each other and cycle within themselves, just as the law will walk itself. The law will walk itself. Sans corrupt men within the instruments, and we have done it. We have perfected a commercial republic where the man, woman, and child's capita is protected from even the corruptions of men within their instruments, as high as the POTUS. And that's what's so repugnant about Mr. Sessions.
Well, what's repugnant is how they can stage these shootings, simultaneously while the Secret Service is busting the largest child pornography bust in the nation's history,
right.
and we have and simultaneously we have these shootings, and then none of it is reported by the mainstream media.
Right. Well, here's the deal on that. And this is, I talk about divinity, and there could be people within it that are doing heinous things, hoping that good things will happen. I'm exposing you now. There's no need for you all to do this anymore. The law's moving. If they're going to do that, this is the interesting thing I have noticed. Okay, we talk about bringing the people. If the law is walking itself right now, because I'm making sure the law is walking. And when I say things in certain ways, in certain forms, in certain process, and I bring the law proper that's in statute, they are mandated to take that over to the next clerk or whatever. They're mandated to do something. So I'm doing things that mandate these administrative ends legis agents and agencies to do something, and they are mandated by law to do it. And it gets to a level where if they don't do it, it becomes criminal, treason, sedition, and conspiracy, as in, i.e., Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, okay, if Obama, as a man, did things in the instrument of POTUS, as if Hillary Clinton did anything in the instrument of Secretary of State that was outside of her ins legis grant of law to do and was a criminal act, she no longer has the protections of Secretary of State, and neither would Obama. So let's say if Obama ordered the FBI to infiltrate a competitor of what he wanted to give his lineage to, they had already conspired. It looks to me like him and Hillary were going to hand off that whole, the frauds that they were effecting through the instrument agencies of state. I mean, it was pathetic. So you have some guy who is sitting in a seat of government operating in potentially a criminal syndicate fashion. He has made the United States and the instruments of the United States Corporation Company a criminal syndicate. Guess what? The man needs put in jail and tried for treason and hung if he did that, because it sullies the seat. Just like the Pope. If the Pope promotes pedophilia, he has sullied the Vicar of Christ's seat. That's the problem with those types of theocracies, cult statism, fascism, is the man on top never seems to want to fix the corruptions of his own place. Well, we created a republic that mandates within the commercial banking structure that when such frauds are effected against the seats of our government, that the banking structure shall affect criminal acts against them because they have affected bond fraud in violating our full faith and credit that gave the seat its power to do what it does. See, they're stuck in the mandates. We have created a system where no man, woman, if they are operating in the seat of the government, are exempt from criminal prosecution, neither for their own acts outside of their grant of law. Meaning, once you stop acting under the ins legis instruments of the police powers de jure, okay, you become repugnant and you're no longer a lawful man. It's about the acts of the man. So if you're in a seat of government, which is neutral, it is an instrument of public trust. It can't even testify or take the fifth. The instrument of law has no substantial rights 1 through 5, from what I understand. 1 through 6, or no, it's actually 1 through 8 in the law, because it can't talk. It's not a real flesh and blood. It's a thing. It can't aver the fifth because things don't speak. Presidents can't aver the fifth in the instrument of POTUS because the instrument of POTUS is a thing and can't speak. The man can't aver the fifth in the instrument of POTUS if it relates to his activities within the instrument of POTUS. He doesn't get the immunity in the seat for acts outside the law of the seat. That's the law. That's not up for debate. And I just posted something on Facebook. Rudy Giuliani just spoke of in personam, and they were talking, well, he already answered subpoena. He goes, he never did in personam as the man. Now, Rudy Giuliani is speaking about in personam standing, about the POTUS not answering subpoenas for within the instrument of POTUS for acts outside the instrument of POTUS with a prostitute. Okay, let's just think about what we're really discussing here when it comes to in personam against Trump. Okay, so he's telling you that there is a man and a seat. Every man holds a seat. Consider that seat a title, too. Every child born into this realm holds a sovereign seat as an inherent owner of in shared usufructuary with every other child that exists in this realm equally in law. When you are born pursuant to our law, each of us, is in equity in all things. In all things. In use, in abuse, in all things. And what the states, the nation states that run our banks, which is all they are at this time really, and seem to affect wars upon us, even on our own people, in our construct, and as I'm sure in Britain and other countries, they affect war upon their own people to oppress their nation banks upon you. In our country, they have actually come to believe and have perfected a process where after you're incarnated, fee simple, protected from detenue, they put your foot on a contract in a footprint called a soul plate and presume to traffic you as a commodity of their national and international theocratic cult banking structure.
Who was that?
That's
Who was that guy that was murdered? Cooper.
There's a bunch of people, even as far as patents.
No, he used to talk about maritime law, like, you know, way back, like in the I think
that's
90s.
where it's at. I mean, that's the one. There's a key phrase, and I repeat it often. Everything that they're affecting against all your property, including your houses, your children, your cars, and everything, because you've engaged in contract with the state by getting a marriage, or took a driver's license. You know,
I think his name is William Cooper.
William Cooper. He is an important key phrase because this is all Admiralty law, because Admiralty law is about salvo, which is about lost vessels. And by their construct and the way they see it, we are spiritless vessels. Our body is our flesh. Our body is our flesh. Our flesh is our vessel.
You can look him up on YouTube. He has a series. He has a series on maritime law. Yeah.
What things are doing in the Parents Patriae, in the Parents Patriae, they're doing under Parents Patriae is at the moment you are incarnated in this realm, they are seizing you as a lost vessel at sea and bringing you into their national theocracy. Okay? Yeah. Their theocratic nationalism. And it's a theocratic nationalism because the banking structure they are using is centered in one theocracy, stemming from a religious instrument that stems from a military republic. Okay, so this is a history of law. We are walking law from the time that Jesus, I've been told not to say Yeshua anymore, that may be the alter ego of Jesus. That when Jesus stated that Rome had no jurisdiction over him, and neither did the Pharisees, and thereby created a civilis mortis declaration. From the time that he did that to now, we've been arguing the same thing, the exact same thing, in all the courts, in the worlds, in all the nations.
If we're going to fight if we're going to pervert and distort reality, have a deceptive media and that is fighting to remove our rights and freedom, and there are people that are willingly going along with this, and the deception is just right in your face, and there's like this mad scramble to just arm us.
Right. You can't disarm the mind, man. You can't disarm the mind. They've tried. And you know what really we're doing is this is really where philosophy, and I love that's so divine in this respect.
We've taken God and philosophy out of the schools for theosophy or theosophy.
Theocracy is just this. Okay, in my mind, religion is a politicalization of spirituality. That's all a theocracy is. A theocracy, in my mind, is a state driven by spiritual constructs that have become a religion. All religions, if you think about it, are cults of people who think supposedly around the same spiritual foundations. Most people in their cult religious practices don't even know the origins of the spiritual foundations they're running around praising, first off. Mm-hmm. They don't look at the history of it. They don't even know what it says. They don't even know what it does. Okay, and that's why when people point about in absolutions about, the Europeans are the one that promoted slavery. No, actually, the Muslim hordes, Jews, and those are people that are making statements not based in fact. I don't have tolerance for those people because they're just off the cuff reacting to a peripheral of minutia that is not based in anything but propaganda. Mm-hmm. So I don't even like to respond because to me that's ignorant.
It's within and that's the thing. It's within our own individual consciousness or thinking that's been conditioned into us over time to be submissive to slavery.
Yeah.
And
I'm not even.
it's so ingrained. It's so ingrained in our society and culture. I mean,
Yet it's not. That's what I said. That's the beauty of Kant, because at the founding of our nation, really, literally at the same time, there was a wonderful philosopher called Immanuel Kant, and he wrote about the constructs of noumenon. And noumenon is the internal knowingness that you are given by your Creator upon your creation to know right from wrong. He says that we are born with the internal knowingness from our Creator. He's basically saying the knowledge of right and wrong is a grant given to you by your Creator, and it is only by the free will acts of men, free will, and or through ignorance, that men veer from that divinity. So what they were banking on when they started our country is that the divinity of humankind would come to see, no matter what, no matter how far this absurd argument of being able to enslave humanity went, to the point where they statutized it. Now they've commoditized it. Now it's trackable in the Federal Reserve note and in the computerized banking structure. You have to understand, we had to have computers to catch these folks. We had to come to an age where every instrument of commerce is tracked by a number to the infinitesimal order. Up until 20 years ago, even from a banking standpoint, we couldn't track them because they were able to launder money according to the banking structure of the Federal Reserve Act, because they didn't have the manpower, the brain power. They didn't have the crunch time in computer track as fast as they were laundering money from us after 3 banking actions. Literally, the law used to be until about 20 years ago, if I wanted to funnel money, I would put it in one bank, then transfer it to another bank, then transfer it to another bank, and then it would drop off the rolls. That doesn't happen anymore. It's tracked from inception to destruction. They can't hide their transactions and their money laundering anymore. But the corruptions haven't been able to keep track of all the tentacles of their tail and been able to put all of the little back doors into the way they have the statutes. I can show you in Ohio where they backdoored the ability. They literally statutized the fact that CPS workers are immune from having to even make averments under affidavit. Like, they've exempted them from requirements of affidavits of fact to seize children by statute in Ohio. Yeah, but that's not baby trafficking contrived. Okay, it's that bad. So when they've had a contrived effort, they've even protected themselves through these backdoor repugnant statutes, right? They haven't been able to do that in all the banking. So it has taken the inception of the statutes, being driven by the demand to eat our babies from inception and to hold our children into bond slavery for the debts of the predecessors of their nation, which, by the way, is unconstitutional. It's called a blood debt, folks. That's in the central body of the Constitution. Neither writs and marquee nor blood debts are allowed by our treaties and our laws. Okay, so how are we in a Federal Reserve Act where they're blood debting our children and coming and getting them with writ of marquee agents and police powers, which are extra constitutional armies of a cooed foreign jurisdictional judiciary affecting salvo? Everyone should record that part, because that's a very specific statement I said in law. These people, it's a divine thing that even through all the drugs that they're pushing on us mentally, through the fluoride from the time you're born, I mean, the degree of fluoride they're polluting our babies with, then if they don't pollute your mind with that, then they're trying to kill you by giving you mitochondria disorders, by giving you immunizations into shock. You know, they're shocking people's immune systems and giving them autism.
They're compromising people's immune system. They're deliberately...
Absolutely. So you make it through that, then you get to their school system, which is a bunch of lies being perpetuated by the same nation state that unlawfully and unconstitutionally oppressed you into it.
They're poisoning you in the food with the spirit cooking and all that other technology.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's these are curses on humanity.
Yeah, and yet, I see through it. And yet, I know what they're doing. And yet, I see the law. And a lot of other people are starting to see it, too. A lot of people are
talking to Miss Lois Justice.
What'd you say?
I said, that's why I love talking to you.
So Immanuel Kant was true.
So because you're like the rooted in law sort of perspective, my perspective on the world, and it's like you verbalize it really, really well.
Well, I understand the need for discussing particularities. Guess what? I pull particularities out the wazoo when I talk to these folks and go, "Oh, did you know in particular what you did is a treasury crime right here? And did you know what you did?"
You're the most balanced, rooted person in logic and reasoning, and just you have it. Like, you're so grounded in that.
I look for divinity because I know it exists. Okay, and I'm going to tell this is what has driven my path. Whenever I found out about the Tona, I'm like, but my country can't be lawless. We are founded upon law. I believed that, and I believed that we have a divinity. That I was told that we were the greatest experiment known to man. That our construct of government, that we are an experiment of what men can be in their free state. And so in our free state, even allowing corruptions to run amok,
and we have the potential to be so much more than
we are. So much. We're being shackled.
Yes.
We've been shackled with criminal intent. We've been shackled, but here's the deal. That was our shackle to bear. That was our shackle to cure and to cast aside. That was our destiny, to cast that shackledom to the wayside in law, with a law based on the faith that the Creator intends us to have equity in all things that we do. That even nations and states of men cannot oppress the child. The child is protected by our law since from his inception, even prior to the conception of in instruments of marriage. The child is protected as a inheritance to the estates of fellow men. If there are claims against the inheritance of my great-great-great-grandfathers laid in a trust argument, and we're not talking about material wealth anymore. We've continued the argument. Now they're in hypothecation. Now we're hypothecating and abrogating children's capita to pay for their argument, and they're done. The claims they laid against our country when they forced us to stay under the trusteeship of their corrupt instruments of state that traffic people and humans as a foundation for their wealth. Okay, so the reason why the monarch said we are wealthy is because I own all these people. Think about it. I own all these people and everything they make, and that's what makes me wealthy. That is the foundation of their banking structure, which we are using today.
Yep.
People being people.
That's exactly how these fat cats think, too.
That's exactly how they think. And yet we have brought forth a law divine, rooted in what righteous men and women believe in their nomenon, and we put that into an instrument that is natural law written down. The Constitution was founded on natural law. It was founded on the Orthodox Christian tenets. It was founded on the Republic of Rome, and we improved upon it by our instruments and took away the ability of the corrupt malfeasance of mankind to corrupt republic instruments of state with the second pillar. That's what their pillar, that's what they corrected. Because it's the commerce, it's the lucre, it's the personal gain. Mm-hmm. You have wealth and you have money. You have cost and you have fee. People don't realize that each of those things, you think that wealth and money are the same thing in law, they're not. You think that cost and fee are the same thing in law, they're not. As a layman, you think they do, but guess what? A cost defines a fee. Okay, a cost is what it's going to cost you. The fee defines what costs you. The cost for doing business in their theocracy is the soul of your child. Did you know that? Did you know that? Mm-hmm. That's the fee. So the cost for you to bank with the Pope is that you must give your soul to the Vicar of Christ as the fief, the fee, to use his vicardom system. Christian orthodoxy, this is all about East-West schism. Christian orthodoxy believes that we have to pay no tithe to anyone to have access to our Jubilee, to what God gave us in equity. So it's a completely different theology. So we have a theocratic state. Ours is based on the natural law of men.
Is theology promoted by the Pope? I mean, as a
well, his theology. Well, that's what I'm saying. People don't understand how you bank, what the history of banking is. They don't understand the history of nations. They don't understand anything, and they run around regurgitating the flashing neon signs of what you're told to get pissed off about, and scream and holler at each other with no concepts of law, history, or what you're even saying. You can't even go, you have some dude called a cop who operates under police powers who are by law and willfully explain to you extra constitutional juventions of the judiciary. They are rooted as slave hunters. That's where police powers come from. A cop stops you on the street with a gun, and he tells you that he has authority over you, and you're going to engage in contract with him by signing this little document you don't even know the meaning of. You don't even know what the all capital names on it are. You don't even know who he works for, and you actually engage in contract. Okay, by Immanuel Kant's terms, he would say that you have lost your nomenon and are insane and you must clearly not know what you are doing. So we were discussing, well, what are you going to do with all these people? Okay, well, what's wrong with Americans? Well, we're naive. We believe that people operate in honor. Americans have this wonderful maximum of life that we believe that people are good at heart, and therefore they must always come at us trying to do the best in all things. That's not true. That's not true in reality, in action. Okay, in the concepts of Voltaire, in the best of all possible worlds, yes, that's true. That's the ideal. But in the reality at hand, in Texas, the president, in his official capacity, ordered the Secret Service to go shut down a website with 75 100 gigabytes of child porn. Right, Amelia? Mm-hmm. That's the reality.
No. I got to clarify something. It's 75 terabytes.
Terabytes. Okay, it's even bigger. I'm sorry, my bad.
Massive.
When they get to godzillion bytes, which is what they say, there's actually a term in banking called godzillion. It's 69 zeros. Okay, that itself. Okay, now you have to think about it. 69 zeros. 69 zeros. If you look at a 6 and a 9, what does that create? That creates an ever-evolving two-man system. So it's really funny. You're like, godzillion, 69 zeros. They're absurdity, right? That's an absurdity. So you see the humor in it, and yet there's also divinity in it. The 69 zeros, if you take a 6 and a 9, it's an ever-evolving oneness. See, so it would be, once you get to godzillions, man, you're above. You are supremo, right? So there's an absurdity. It's the same thing. There's a particularity to it. And then there's an absurdity to it, and then there's the law to it too. I mean, and that's how you really know that's when you know God's making a joke. That's a joke from God, really. Mm-hmm. You gotta laugh at that stuff. That people actually believe that I am God because I have 69 zeros after my will. I mean, really. But that's how they think. That's how they think. They think there are gods. They literally think they are our gods. Yeah. Like, created my spirit. I mean, that's like the ultimate thing. Really? Let me find. Now, I'm not saying they can't steal my spirit. I mean, if I'm just an energy entity, a light being, I can be trapped in a prismatic cell, can't I?
If we're just being reincarnated here over and over again, and we only have the illusion of free will, what is the point?
Well, but yet I have the free will to point it out as an illusion, and then I am, aren't I? If I go back to Descartes, I think, therefore I am. I think that I am not party to this paradox. Therefore I am not of this paradox, and I am separate from it. And ha ha, QED, I am. That's when you are not insane. See, that's why this is all about literally the eschatology of selfdom, like the theology of selfdom, the law of selfdom, not selfdom. Because in order to understand self in a system of selfdom is when all men have a sense of self, have a right to self. So when I argue selfdom, I'm not arguing for my right to be self. I'm arguing for the right of all men, women, and children to have a self, a law that defines the nature of self and the rights therein. We created the natural law of selfdom in our instruments of our Fourth Crown Republic.
Oh my gosh, I love this. My brain is so stimulated right now.
But it's the philosophy, and that's why I'm trying to explain to people, this is a argument of commerce overlaid a much larger construct of law. Mm-hmm. You're arguing that we are not born fee simple, protected from detinue. They are saying that my son Clay, from the day he was incarnated in this realm, is obligated by their construct of banking and international law, even the way it's structured now, to be able to be a product and an item, a property of the United States Corporation Company. And the way they're operating internally with that, in the clearinghouses through our Treasury, which run all international banking, they're allowing them to be commoditized and trafficked as things.
So, Lotus, do you think this is going to go to a military tribunal? It has to, right?
Well, there are already military tribunals happening.
Well, I don't know.
I really do.
Would the public even be privy to that knowledge?
I think that's why Sessions sitting on it, because okay. I want front row seats to the first hanging of the first round of sitting head edges of state that are going to be hung on the lawn, because that is not an option. If things, and we have discussed this, okay, we talked about this after Trump got elected and the things that were happening even before he got elected, when it was looking like Hillary was going to win. Okay, she needed to win so she could declare the immunity in her POTUS position from crimes against the state, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you what a bullet we dodged by getting Trump in there. Okay,
oh, I know. She was even quoted saying that if we lose this, we all our heads hang.
They're hanging, because if they've done what it looks like they're doing, we discussed this before there's any conversation about any of this. I told everybody they have to be hung. These are hangable offenses. They will be hung on the White House lawn. They will be hung between the Capitol and the Washington Monument, folks. Literally, gallows shall be put there. And I don't think it's going to be one or two. So that is the law. Sessions doesn't get to prevent the law from being walked as the law mandates. People who stand in the way of what the law says is mandated of their instrument are affecting treason and sedition, obstructions to justice under acts of predicated acts of RICO. Sessions is looking like he is obstructing justice in predicated acts of RICO, preventing treason and sedition and an attempted coup of the POTUS position of the United States, those crimes from being brought to the indictments and public trials. If he's doing that, he will hang himself in the end. That's what I'm going to tell you. So anybody who's sitting in an instrument of state better look at what they're mandated by law to do, because if you don't stop obstructing the law, because see, the law walks. People talk about the court. The court, Big C court, does not need a building. Our court sits in our hearts, if we judge by our heart of hearts and our faith, which you get your credit through banking with, deems you to be a criminal, that's how you're judged. A court, they're the ones that need temples for courts. We don't. Remember, Jesus said, you guys are using your temples for banks. Sound familiar? We are the Gentiles who were given courts without a temple. We're not judged here. That's the court that's going to judge them. That's the court. That's the big C court. The law is the law, and if you don't walk it and instructing it, you're a criminal. That's a fact. Especially if you're an instrument of state bound by that law to do such things.
That's why I think it's so important that we stay focused on the criminality and the indictments and convictions and the system.
Who you are.
Because that's how we tell, what's really
going on. The law does not care. The law, if we're all in equity, if we're all in equity, and Sessions is running around going, well, I don't think we should do this. Okay, but you think poor women who have become victimized by the system and have to throw their only commodity left to them on the street corner.
Right now, Congress is in their feelings.
What?
Congress is in their feelings. They can't represent we the people. They're in their feelings.
If you're saying that Hillary Clinton as a woman is exempt from criminal prosecution because it just doesn't look good, because it might, it might open up the can of worms you might be enjoined in. You have to think, people don't usually recuse themselves unless they're enjoined, folks. Let's put it that way. So, in his recusal, he's saying he's enjoined. You do understand that, folks. You don't recuse yourself unless you have some interest in it. The minute he recused himself, Trump should fire him, because that is an admission that he's enjoined. And what he's enjoined in what the DOJ, the head of the DOJ is somehow associated, attached, because the word enjoined means to be attached to. It's from injundo, injuendo, I believe is how it's spelled. Enjoindo means to attach. He is somehow attached to the corruptions of the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton and the FBI. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to recuse himself, would he?
And I want to point something out. Everything is infiltrated. The right, the left, the Republicans, the everything is infiltrated. So
propaganda. As my friend said, there's no one party. There's no two parties. You're all having one party in D.C., and it's a party without us in it. Mm-hmm. That's what he used to say. It's one big party in D.C., guys. Hey, let's have. I don't understand what the word party means. Democrat. We're going to stand over here and go, woohoo, let's have some beer. We're Democrats. And the Republican Party is, woohoo, we're going to stand over here and say we're Republicans and drink some beers. And we drink beer, we drink wine. We're for guns, we're for not. It's just a joke, guys. It's comedy. Comedy, not comity. And it's a party like, woohoo, with drinks.
And
pomp and circumstance, little fires everywhere, and no substance.
I think I'm running out of charge, and you're starting to cut out.
It's theater. So we're in the theater right now where you're starting to see agents of state openly admit to treason and sedition just in the very act. Prima facie, if you have a DOJ, the head of the Department of Justice has to recuse himself from an investigation that lends to treason and sedition, dude needs removed. And he certainly shouldn't be able to obstruct the prosecution of anything associated with said acts. The dude needs removed because he has admitted that he is enjoined in some way, shape, or form.
And if we can't get Congress to do their job, we've got to.
Well, in Congress is first. That's not de jure Congress. A real Congress could convene a grand jury within its ranks and have the ability to subpoena and send out and mandate compliance with force. It's not that hard, but they're not de jure, are they?
Yeah. Well, listen.
Let's convene a federal common law grand jury who could order the military to do whatever they wanted to do. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
There are instruments can make those people do their job, and they can be put in jail until they do it, and they can be removed from their office, because what you have, again, is you have people in their seats of government obstructing the duties of the seat. Again, if there's a man sitting in an instrument of state whose duties have been defined and designated by statute and by law to have a fiduciary, and they are not doing it, that is a crime, and they need removed because it's an obstruction to justice, and they need removed so that justice can be delivered and those instruments fulfilled. Men and women do not control what the seat is mandated by statute to do. That is a criminal act. Okay. It's called sedition.
Okay. Well, I want to plug the book that you mentioned one more time, but I have to wrap it up pretty soon here.
Which book? I don't know.
The one by Kant.
It's just Immanuel Kant. He's just a philosopher. I suggest people investigate his concepts of noumenon, which is the knowingness of self by our creation. It's a spiritual. This is all spiritist people. This is all about the spiritual rights of men. Okay, so big picture. This is for the shebang. It's these pedophile things are just the tip of the iceberg. That's going to point to the baby trafficking and the banking founded upon commoditizing of children worldwide, and these people believing they can do what they want to our kids and oppress them with debts of their own machinations. I mean, it's a very disgusting and contrived reality. So
we're going to be back. You're going to come back on Saturday, right, for Lunch with Lotus?
And I know that this thing in Texas with these kids and this shooting was directly probably planned and required because of what Amelia's talking about this disclosure of this very horrible incident with all this data that's going to be probably a huge domino when it comes to the international child trafficking and the trafficking within the United States by our own government, the FBI, stuff like that.
Well, it certainly raised red flags with for me, and I usually like to come on, and I appreciate so much all of your insight and knowledge and expertise. You're amazing. You're brilliant.
There's just a bigger picture here.
Lunch with Lotus.
The reason I want people to entertain that is because what they need to understand is these mass psyche events are there to try to get you to not remember this other thing. Okay? Try to get you. So, 9/11 happened a day after admitted that they were missing $15 trillion in cash. That was just their surface audit.
Oh, and it's the same 9/11. The racism and the right and the left and all of that. It's to get us.
Points to a manipulated reality. That points to a group of
out, and I think my device is going to die.
I love you, but it points to that is proof of the contrived reality and manipulated reality we're sitting in. Okay, that's the point.
Yeah, this is the Matrix. This is the
yes. And I'm not saying people didn't die. They have no problem killing people. They kill people every day in their little theaters of war. War's called a theater, folks. Come on, man.
All the world is a stage. All right, Lotus, I've got to go. I've got to wrap it up.
Yep.
Everybody,
thanks.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Porthole to Justice, The Window to the Truth. This has been another episode of Off the Cuff. You can subscribe to the show for free on Spreaker.com. You can join the live chat. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Patreon, too. Check me out on Patreon. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.